Hey guys, Isaac here. So I do a lot of furniture design on Sketchup, and one of the things Sketchup is really good at is square shapes. One of the things Sketchup is not so good at, especially for a beginner, is any kind of rounded shapes. With furniture design, some of the most common ones that you'll see people ask for are stuff like a rouleau triangle, any kind of super ellipse or lamé style furniture, stadiums, especially with like the mid-century modern stuff. So I've seen a lot where people online are asking, hey, I have this project I need to do, and it's usually something like a super ellipse or something like that, and they can't figure out how to do it on SketchUp. Before I go off on a tangent, let me show you kind of what I'm talking about. So here's a rouleau triangle. So you can see it's essentially like a triangle, only the corners are rounded wherever it meets, but it's still essentially a triangle. It's still essentially, a three-sided shape. It's just rounded. It has the round curve along each face, and it also rounds in on the corner. So I'm going to show you how we do that here on SketchUp today. If you have any questions or if you have a better way to do it, put it in a comment below, and I'm always open to learning new ways to do it, so maybe there's a better way than the way I'm doing it. But I'll show you on a square and on a three-sided shape, a triangle, how I would do a rounded corner, and if you have any tips, let me know. So this is obviously a finished model, but I can show you quickly how I would do it on a new model. So we'll go ahead and open that up. You can minimize this. So starting with a square, we're not going to do any textures today. So starting with a square, let's just start a basic square here. Go ahead and call it 30 by 30. That's fine. Essentially what we're doing is creating an ellipse that covers all these sides but also meets at the edge. I found for a square shape, one number that seems to work well for me is to add a little bit to the side. So I'll go and copy that one side, the one line length. We know that this is 30 inches, like our square. So we'll go ahead and make a circle just slightly larger than 30. And we want to go and open up I'm not sure what the keyboard shortcut is on PC, but on Mac, if you press Option plus, you can add more sides, and that's important on this step because you don't want something that is too blocky. So we'll go and up that to about 88 or so. So we know that that's 30, so let's increase the radius, which is half the diameter of the circle, and we'll call it 18, which would make that about 36. From there, I can take this and scale this down on the one axis, and we'll scale it down to about, let's say 33. So we've got that. That's one of our rounded sides of this rounded square that we're going to create. So we'll copy both of those parts. We'll copy the line and we'll copy the ellipse there. Now we can just take that, click it into place. Pressing Command V to copy it, and then we'll just pull it from that line. So we have two sides now. We'll just take that and rotate it 90 degrees, and we can move that onto the corner. Rotate the next one, same orientation, and move it onto the corner. So obviously this isn't going to be a perfect line. If you zoom in really close, you can see that it does overlap a little bit. I just trimmed that off. It's not a big enough deal to me that those ellipses match perfectly, and when you zoom out of it, it's barely noticeable. So just go around, trim off all those little excess details, and we have a pretty good ellipse here. So essentially, as I said, the super ellipse is just like a rounded square where it meets round on the corners, but also the sides are rounded. And with a larger square, you could play around with these numbers a little bit. And you do have a little bit of cleanup here to get rid of some of these extra lines. But I'm just going around and selecting them and deleting them wherever I find them. you double click a line that's disconnected, you can delete all of the connecting faces at once. I mean, you could just delete all of this at once and recreate the face fill, but this is not too bad. It's not so much work that I'm considering that really. There you go. So now you have a super ellipse of a square. You can use this to create a super ellipse of a rectangle if you wanted. You could scale this up. Twice as large. And you have a nice rectangular super ellipse. That could be a dining table or something like that. Or you could just use this and use that as, you know, a coffee table or something like that. And you'll find super ellipses in all sorts of designs for furniture. It's a pretty popular mid-century modern design. So that's a super ellipse of a square. Now, obviously, in the example that I showed you, I'd done a triangle, so it's pretty similar. I don't usually, you can create a shape with a polygon tool. And you can just change the number of sides or anything like that. But I don't like that because it's a little bit harder to create an exact line length. It'll give you the inscribed size, which is great if you want to know the exact distance for something like that, but for a triangle, the inscribed size is not really helpful. So we'll start with a line here. And we'll just do a line anywhere you want. If you get your line tool out, once you click your point, you can find any orientation. And before clicking your next point, you can just type the size that you want. So I'm typing 30 inches, just like our square. And then from here, you could either, if you're doing a square, you could follow the axis and recreate it that way, but because we want to do a triangle, I know we're going to do an equilateral triangle. It's easy enough to just get the protractor out and do 60-degree intervals to create our equilateral triangle. Because the triangle has 180 degrees, if each corner is 60 degrees, you have an equilateral triangle. So we have our triangle here. So very similar to the square, we're going to do, you know, a shape like this, but you'll notice that the points are coming in much more acute than a square, so we want to shrink it a little bit more than you would shrink the square, or less, I should say, actually, rather. So we'll recreate that line again, pull out our circle tool, and we want to check to make sure that the sides are large, just like the other ones. So keep it up around 88, I found is a good number. Make sure our radius is 18 again to give us some overlap, and we'll take that and we'll just shrink this down. Call it 35. 35 is probably fine for a triangle. So we'll take these two parts and we'll copy it just like before and orient them along the faces. So we know that this is 60 degrees, so we can either look for 60 degrees as we're rotating it, or we can just select it and type it in. Same with the last face, we'll turn it from the bottom and 60 degrees pops up because we've just used that measurement. So you can see with the sharper angle, the lower shrinking of the circle works a little bit better. And same thing, we're going to go in and delete some of these extra lines. There may be a better way to do this. This is just the way that I found is the easiest way to create a rounded shape. And same thing on the inside, we'll delete these extra lines. If I'm using this for furniture design, sometimes I'll leave some of the inside lines because it'll help me find places that I can grab from. But that's totally up to you. But from here, I took this shape, and that's how I created this rounded shape. It's the exact same triangle. I added an edge profile with just a chamfer on the top and a larger chamfer on the bottom. But that is like a pretty essential floating nesting table. And usually when I finish something that I'll use a lot like this, I'll go and I'll save this in my design resources folder as different shapes so I don't have to recreate them. Just zooming out here, you can see these are some of the different ones that I use commonly. So this is your rounded square, like a lamé curve or a super ellipse. Same thing, just scaled up on the rectangle. You can also take these sides and say you don't want such a large side, you can scale that down from there. And maybe that's, you know, a shape that's more fitting to the project that you're working on. But that's totally up to you. As I said, this is a pretty common panel that you might make for furniture. You know, same thing. This is instead of the equilateral triangle, this is more of an isosceles look. This is more like your Noguchi coffee table or something like that. But these are some pretty common ones. Another one that you might see often as well is just a stadium shape, which has a little bit less design work in it, but it's pretty easy. You just take your circle from either point. Now you have a stadium. And if you don't know, a stadium is like a stadium they might see in sports, but it's the word that we use to describe this rectangular shape with a semicircle or sphere on either side. So that's my video for today. Just a nice, quick, simple one on super ellipses and rounded geometric shapes, and I hope you found it helpful. If you have any questions or if you're trying to do something similar and you can't seem to figure it out, comment below and maybe I'll find something that can help other people. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening.